Eric. 1. It had been 10 years. Eric often thought about his sister and his niece he left in the capital. He wondered if they were okay here and often regretted leaving them, but after what transpired all those years ago, he knew he had no other choice. He felt the cold steel around his neck as he walked to the frozen tundra. The heirloom around his neck proved who he really was, who his family was. However, that doesn't matter now, he thought to himself. I am Copy now. After all, that's why he was here, to prepare his son for the Skeletor. At least that's what he told Ryker. Although it was true that he would be going away for a number of years once he turned 15, Eric was much more concerned about the tribe of the Cliffs who had threatened them. The ultimatum still rang in his mind, the words the man in the skull mask snarled. The land is ours, the man demanded. If you and yours don't move on after 39 cycles, we will come and he will kill all of you and take the land that is rightfully ours. Normally a warrior of the Copy would not worry about such a threat. Such a thing was common in the East amongst these people. But Eric was one of the rangers and he knew the tribe of the Cliffs outnumbered them 5-1. While Eric was lost in his thoughts, he hadn't realized that Casper and his son had snuck up behind him. When he felt their presence, he snapped back into reality and turned to greet his son and his son's friend. Well done. If you had been a member of another tribe, I may be dead, Eric said. Ryker beamed with pride for a second and then he asked his father what would come next for his training. Eric reflected for a moment and then he said, I know I've been hard on you boys these past couple of weeks, but judging by the way that you snuck up on me just now, it seems to be paying off. I have one final task for you, Ryker, the tired old man declared, while looking at his son with melancholy. What about me? Casper complained. Eric smiled and said, you are the son of a chief, Casper. You will attend the Concac. Anyway, it will still be some time until you turn 15. Eric continued. It's time for you to return to the village. Ryker must face this test on his own. With that, the short, pale boy who had often followed the son around sighed and began walking back towards the village. Ryker and Eric waited for several minutes in silence, waiting for the boy to get further and further away once the distance seemed appropriate to Eric, and spoke once again. You see that cliff, my son? He asked. Ryker stared off into the distance until he spotted what his father had mentioned. Yes, he exclaimed. Good, Eric said while he smiled. On top of that cliff is a cave. In that cave you will find a Rabjoran. A what? Ryker asked with a puzzled expression. A Rabjoran, Eric clarified. They are a type of creature that is indigenous to these lands. For reference, remember your first hunt 7 years ago when we killed that bear with my spear? Well, think of that bear combined with a lurker from the sea. Even after giving his explanation, his son's face still looked confused. Any questions? Eric asked. Yeah, what's a lurker again? Ryker asked. I see you haven't been studying, Eric said, irritated. Lurkers are massive beasts that are found in warmer climates off the coasts of the sea. Instead of having bones like we do, they are supported by an exoskeleton. The outside of them holds them up. So the Rabjoran is an exoskeleton bear? Ryker asked. Pretty much, Eric said, but it's not an exact comparison. Anyway, that's not important. What's important is I need you to kill it and bring me its head, and then I will know you are ready for the Skeletor. Ryker II. The fear running through Ryker's was almost more than he could handle, but he did not want his father to see his bluff. So Ryker made sure to keep his game face on as he packed his equipment from the track up the cliff and into the cave to begin the literal fight for his life. Before he could leave, his father grabbed him by the shoulder, looked him straight in the eye, and told him that he was proud of him. Ryker thanked his father and assured him he would return, but in the back of his mind he still had creeping doubt that he could defeat the Rabjoran. Once Ryker had gotten far enough away from his father that he was alone, everything truly started to sink in. The magnitude of the situation for most would be too much to bear, but for Ryker, this was what he'd been waiting for, a chance to prove himself to his father and to his village. Ryker loved his father and wondered how much easier his life would have been if his mother had married a native Copy. Because his father was an outsider, Ryker often felt that mark upon himself, even though he was born and raised in the Copy nation. He always felt like he had something to prove to the boys and girls of the village, and now this was his chance. It was hard to believe he was on his way to do something so monumental. Ryker had walked this frozen valley 1,000 times before, and now this time was the time that mattered most. It was a long time before he had crossed the frozen flats to the other side of the cliff face. Ryker began to ascend the cliff face with his grappling spikes in a zigzag pattern, just like his father had always taught him. Before Ryker knew it, he had surpassed the first cliff face. There he saw fresh prints and realized that they did not belong to any member of his tribe. Ryker never even had a second to react when he felt the sharp pain of an arrow slide into his knee. The pain hit the young boy on the verge of becoming a man, like 10,000 pounds of ice falling from the sky. Ryker knew this tactic well. It was standard in copy single combat training. Wound an enemy before charging them in an open field. Sure enough, as Ryker looked up, he saw the warrior charging him with his blade unsheathed. This warrior was well built, muscular, and much older than Ryker. He knew he had little chance to defeat him, especially now since he was injured. However, Ryker did as he was taught and held his ground as the warrior advanced. That second the warrior reached him, he swung violently as Ryker ducked and the blade passed over his head. And then a second and third swing and a second and third dodge for Ryker. Even on a bum leg, the boy was spry and had a strong will to survive. Finally, Ryker dodged a blow that landed in the ice behind him, giving him the opening he needed to draw daggers from his belt and go for this man's jugular. The warrior's blood cascaded onto the snow like a waterfall of red. Ryker had killed plenty of animals before, but this was his first man. As a copy, this was a rite of passage, but Ryker didn't feel proud. He didn't feel anything at all. Ryker wiped his blades on the man's fur and began climbing the cliffs yet again. He would not be distracted. He would not be denied. He would bring his father that creature's head. Even after pulling out the arrow and wrapping it up tight, the pain would not leave his mind's eye. Despite this, he continued to push through. Once Ryker made it to the cave, he found the creature far too large to engage in single combat. He would surely be killed in that case. So Ryker used an old copy tick to melt the ice of the frozen stalactites. Then he used himself as bait to lure the creature into the drop zone. The problem was that his timing was off and the stalactites missed their mark. And the rabjaw slashed Ryker across his chest with its pincher claws, sending him flying back into the cliff face and knocking him out on the rocks. However, just before losing consciousness, Ryker saw his father's spear pierce the beast right in its heart.